So I wrote the book, set it aside, and I wasn't quite happy with it. I didn't send it away, and I wasn't sure why. And then I thought, there are multiple narrators in the book. It's all over time and space, but it's all about the Raft Baby. But she didn't have a voice in the book, so I thought she needs to have her say. So then I wrote the first chapter in the Raft Baby's voice, and the last chapter in the Raft Baby's voice, and bookended those two chapters onto the rest of the story. So that's how the Raft Baby came to be. So tonight I think I'll start reading. This is chapter 1, and it's the new, what I call soft opening compared to the opening I started with. Condy Meadows Nursing Home, Manning, Alberta, June 10th, 1994. The walls in Lily's room are painted cream, real cream that has risen to the top of the crock. Not exactly yellow, but nowhere near white. The winter white trim, newly installed and 4 inches wide, is a pleasing note. Dean, our cheery handyman, is always adding little touches like that to make this place feel less like an institution and more like home. Harlan Miller, who just turned 88 and was finally forced to give up living alone on his ranch and riding herd on his Red Angus cows without help, dubbed this place the finishing barn on the day that his children moved him in, nearly 2 months ago. How they convinced him to give nursing home life a try, I have no idea. I do know that they have no intentions of letting him return home, no matter if he settles or not. The 3 other male residents, men are few and far between in homes for the aged, have really taken a liking to the name, and they often joke about it, but it's no joke to Harlan. The east sun is streaming in, and Lily's tough little money tree is, as usual, not growing, but not dying either. The lacy curtains her daughters have hung across the bay window on a silver rod create pleasing patterns on the opposite wall, shapes shifting in a desultory manner as the breeze tickles the curtains with lazy fingers. The poor old girl is sleeping soundly this morning, her papery eyelids flickering. Her chest is rising and falling so gently that I stand beside her bed just to make sure. I don't want to wake her, so I put her breakfast tray on her little metal table. Thankfully, she doesn't hear the rattle, for Lily is really quite deaf. She thinks we all mumble, and that her daughters don't enunciate clearly. Not anymore. She's taught them better, is what she says. She absolutely refuses to try a hearing aid. Nothing wrong with my hearing, she says. I hear all I need to hear. I know I am supposed to wake the residents and make sure that they eat, but today, for Lily, I can't. She looks so small and so very tired. When they come to retrieve the trays, perhaps some steely woman, much less attuned than I, will wake her, cajole her to take a bit of congealed porridge and drink her cooling tea. But I know Lily. She will sweetly ask for brown sugar, not white, for her porridge, and to have her cream warmed a bit. She will not take one sip of her tea unless it's served piping hot and in a bone china teacup. Today, the kitchen has sent a green ceramic mug. Obviously, someone new has started and not checked the copious notes concerning the residents, what they like and what they don't. I know that for Lily, this will definitely not do, and maybe that's why I decide to let her sleep. And maybe I let her sleep because for the last 3 nights I worked, she was wide awake and restive, struggling in and out of bed, straightening her sheets again and again, climbing back into bed but not settling, flicking through the channels on her TV. Up again, straightening the sheets, fluffing the comforter, checking the money tree to see if it needs watering, taking up a pen and a notebook, but not writing a single word. Her daughters tell me she used to be a great one for making lists at the end of the day, a blueprint for tomorrow. Lily, it seems, was never without a plan until now. There are 4 books stacked on the bay window ledge, 2 poetry books, one a thick blue volume of Robert W. Service, and another slim gray one by Mary Oliver, a poet I have never heard of. Mary Oliver's book is well read, dog-eared and underlined here and there. So I read those passages when I get a chance. They mostly center on nature and wild animals and birds. Also love. I am curious to know what it was in those poems that really spoke to Lily. What was she thinking before? There is also one paperback murder mystery and a tattered black Bible, the bindings loose and the gilt on the edges of the pages thumbed away. Although she has given up reading entirely now, the books remain. Sometimes she chooses one and holds it, but she never turns the page. Getting old, Lily once told me, is all about managing small losses. And those small losses amount to something big, like having to leave your home. The physical sorting and packing was beyond me by then, she said, her eyes round and earnest behind her smudged glasses. Thank God for the girls. They handled that for me, and very efficiently too. But it was up to me to prepare myself, mentally, I mean. How did you do that, I wanted to ask, when you had no choice but to leave your home and all of the jumbled pieces of your life? I am at a place in my own life where I am trying to imagine a leaving, but I have no idea where to start. I wish I had asked her when she spoke of it, but I was not courageous enough, so I let the opportunity slip away. It has been only 2 days since I worked 3 straight 12s, which are a real killer, health-wise and home-wise too. So tonight, I am already tired, partly because of my schedule, and partly because Donovan has been out of sorts lately, and I have no idea why. He spends all of his time out in the shop, as far as I can tell, although I'm often not around. Maybe it would be different if we'd had a family, some kids to bind us together at the end of a long shift. That would have been nice. I used to take him a beer, usually a nice cold Pilsner, perch on his welding stool and watch him work. Admire the muscles delineated beneath his blue t-shirt, the round rise of his amazing butt. I don't do that anymore. So that's the partial, a little bit of the beginning, the soft beginning. So I'll leave the Lily and her caretaker right there. Have to take a drink here. So I think now we'll go to the Peace River country, much earlier in time. And this is, Trapper John was, he was a trapper, a hunter, like a frontiersman, and he lived in the north. He did come to Ottawa and find himself a wife and took her back to the Peace Country. But he's still out there doing his thing, and she's back home in camp. He also has a brother and a sister-in-law who are greenhorns from Ottawa, who came out to try and make their fortune in the gold rush, a very small gold rush that petered out quickly. So this is the Peace River, September 24th, 1897. Trapper Jackson John had been paddling against the current since the first pink blush of dawn. His muscles were screaming with every pull. Waves smacked his bow, and he was fighting hard to face the onslaught. The roiling water rushed past his canoe, grasping at its birch bark skin with frantic fingers, as if to slow him down. The Peace is not called the Mighty Peace for nothing, he thought, and I'm so damn tired you'd swear I was drunk. 6 whole days of scouting and nothing at all. He hadn't spotted any beaver sign of his sister-in-law Isabel and her greenhorn husband. He'd been unable to find a single whisper. No one had seen them, not the Dene, not the traveling missionaries, not the lone trapper he'd come across. And he'd found no blackened campfires, no sign of human passage, nor messages scratched on massive rocks. Skip up a bit here. He pulled again on the paddles, but his heart wasn't in it, and he knew it was time to take a rest. The worst thing a man can do while traveling alone is to keep going past the point of exhaustion. Bad things happen then, most times, and Trapper meant to get back to Annie as soon as humanly possible. No stumbles along the way. He'd already been gone too long. The thought of Annie keeping camp and waiting patiently to see her sister again was almost more than he could bear. His powerful arms were aching, his back sore from the long day of sitting. He groaned aloud. Then in an open spot on the south bank, he spotted a circle of charred rocks and a neat pile of wood. He blessed the unwritten law of the trail. Use what you need and leave a leg up for the fellow coming behind. He angled the canoe, muscles flooded with adrenaline, and aimed for the shore. The opening was small, and if he missed it, he had a jagged outcropping of rock downstream and a solid wall of forest to contend with. He didn't really feel up to any such challenge just now. With one mighty surge, he escaped the pull of the current and paddled easily to shore. He beached his canoe, tying it to the sturdy aspen, its fluttering leaves laced with the first tinges of fall finery, golden, yellow, ochre, and flaming orange under the fading forest of green. He tugged on the rope, satisfied his canoe was soundly anchored. With steady purpose, he gathered dried leaves, inhaling their sweet scent. He snapped small brittle sticks for kindling and laid a perfect fire. Soon he had a battered pot full of the Peace boiling above the blackened stones. He was hungry and he was tired, but he forced himself to the edge of the clearing and chopped a fragrant pile of balsam boughs. When he was satisfied with their arrangement, he was tempted to collapse onto his newly made bed. Not just yet, he thought, stretching his cramped arms wide. Not just yet. In the bush, preparation could save your life. When all my chores are done, there will be plenty of time for rest. Tea time. He poured 1 cup of boiling water into the thick green mug and set it aside. He'd shot and dressed a mallard duck at the end of yesterday when it was too late to start a meal. Now he unwrapped the carcass, and squatting beside the coals, he slid it into the blackened pot and poked it down with a stick. He fumbled in the bottom of his knapsack for his bag of loose tea, but then he stilled, for upstream he'd spotted something. A tangle of logs? Something aflutter? A flash of red, all borne with frightening speed down the mighty Peace. You've been alone too long, my friend, he muttered. The sun had eased his aching back, and the promise of a good strong cup of tea and a biscuit or two was uppermost in his thoughts. But his eyes were drawn again to the Peace. A craft of some kind, hurrying down the river? He stood and shaded his eyes, staring hard at the water. He shook his head and checked again. I am not hallucinating. Grabbing his canoe, Trapper scraped its bottom on the rocky shore in his haste. It can't be, but I know what I'm seeing. Finally afloat, he paddled toward the middle of the river, his muscles flooded with sudden strength. As he neared, he saw it was a raft, solidly built. He was glad when he saw a small red flag snapping at the top of an upright stick, for it was a bad sign to begin imagining things while traveling alone on the Peace. Trapper John began to swear, a string of inventive curses, some even he had never heard before. For on the cradle board, wedged between two short lengths of birch and secured by a rope, he could see what appeared to be a baby wrapped in a blanket. He rode the river, his eyes darting between the bone-chilling water and the bucking raft. He positioned himself alongside and, leaning low, nearly caught its edge. So close. He turned his canoe, paddled hard, and pulled alongside the raft once again. This time he managed to grab the crosspiece and hold on, his fingers clutching hard. Silver glinted on the burnished blade of his skinning knife as he slashed the ropes securing the cradle board. He grabbed it and hauled it into his canoe, cursing still. Holding the cradle board close, he loosened his grip on the raft. Like a too small fish thrown back, it hurried down the Peace. "Excuse my language," he said when he looked down at the baby. "It's just that I never dreamt." A baby? He hadn't partaken in any pipe ceremonies lately or chewed on any unidentified plants. But could this be a dream? Or was it a vision? The Dene sometimes talked of visions. When it gave a mewling cry, he knew for sure the baby was real. He feared who it might be and wondered why in God's name any child was alone on the Peace. The baby's features were fine, and a fringe of curls peeked out from beneath a bonnet. A girl, he thought. A flotsam baby girl for sure. As he paddled shoreward with the child, he was calculating her chances. At the very least, and against great odds, she'd found her way to him. Once ashore and his canoe again secured, he undid the tidy knots securing her, one by one, until she was free. Who? Why? Her lips were cracked and tinged with blue, and as he'd loosened the bindings, one arm had fallen free, as if she were a rag doll who had lost too much stuffing. But her eyes were bright and focused on his face. "Tough luck," he told her. "Trail smarts I got, but when it comes to babies, well..." He held her as if she were made of spun glass. "You're safe and sound," he told her, "but definitely soggy on the bottom." He spread his ground sheet over the fragrant balsam, laid her down with infinite care. How to change a diaper? He could track and hunt and fish and barter with the best of them and find his way across this goddamn country entirely alone. But changing a loaded diaper was something new. He drew a deep breath, steadied his trembling hands. Eventually, he fashioned a crude diaper from two of his regulation dotted red bandanas, lining them with soft sphagnum moss. Moss more efficient than a sponge, he knew. Probably a lot better for a baby's bottom than soggy doubled flannel. She tolerated his fumbling efforts with surprising patience. When he'd finally finished, Trapper lifted her languid body and tucked her head beneath his chin. With a rusty voice, he began to sing an off-key lullaby. The baby drifted off to sleep. So now he's found the baby. So he looks after her that night, but he doesn't know what to do with her. So he thinks of the Dene camp where he had been treated well, and they gave him food and moccasins and friendship. So he decided to try to find their camp. So I'll just read this little bit where he gets back to the camp. Trapper broke camp just after dawn, the baby snug in her cradle board and his arms ready to paddle the river. A little breeze had come up, and it was at his back. He was thankful for the help, and if he had believed in God, he might have said a prayer of thanks. They made good time all morning, Trapper paddling hard and the baby watching his every move. Thankfully, she did not cry. Eventually, the rocking of the river lulled her to sleep, her thick black lashes spiky shadows on her chapped cheeks. Just before the sun reached its zenith, he saw smoke rising along the north shore and was thankful that the Dene had not yet broken camp. "Wake up, Raft Baby. We have some important people to meet." The baby's lips puckered as he touched them with a blackened forefinger. She yawned wide and began to wiggle. His arms tightened around the cradle board. Her violet eyes found his, and he suddenly had an urge to turn his canoe around and paddle hard back to Annie, to home. An old woman watched from the shore, shading her eyes with the edge of a leathered hand. She waved him in, wading into the icy water to steady his canoe. "You are back, my friend," she said, "and bearing a gift. I have been waiting, for I dreamed of it last night. This one has been sent to us for a reason." She reached for the child, carefully unwrapping her, balancing the baby on the wide plane of her hip. She pointed to a silver scar on the baby's middle right toe. The scar was tiny, but perfectly shaped. An arrowhead, sure as she was born. "This scar," she said, "is much older than the baby. This child will survive the trials of life and live to a wise old age." The trapper reached out, ran his coarse finger across the small scar. "She will know things," the old woman said, "things that cannot be known." Well, that's the end of Trapper for that part. Do you have should I read a little bit more or should I stop?
Read as much as you want.
Okay, I'm just going to read, this is a very short piece, but so the Raft Baby, she has an amazing journey. She has different people taking care of her from the time she's found on the raft, and the story is really until she is on the eve of her marriage. That's kind of where the story reaches its climax. But this part here is once Trapper leaves the baby with the Dene, there's a wet nurse who's lost her own child. So this woman starts to feed the baby. And so this is chapter 17, and it's called The Other Mother. "My breasts will not stop weeping, weeping for my baby, weeping for me. On my bed of fresh-cut balsam, I turn my face from the light and pray for a gentle death. My husband seeks solace in the caribou hunt, in the loud company of men, and he tries to ease his grief with firewater and sweetgrass smoke. And at night, when he comes to our teepee, he is hungry, hungry for food and hungry for me. Please, I cannot, not yet, not so soon. I do not want my body to conceive another, to bring my weakness again into the world. And so I sleep, and I sleep." The tent flap is pulled aside, the light like needles in my eyes. Adahe, an ancient one who has brought me soup and a cheese and talked to me of my son, walks softly to my bed, kneels. "Look," she says. She holds a languid baby, her tiny fingers splayed open, not fisted as a baby should be. Summer is waning, and I fear you are too. This little one is hungry, thirsty too. See, her hands are already pushing on the spirit wall. And in the fading light, this baby fixes me with her violet eyes. I touch the center of her palm, and the little fingers begin to close around mine. "You must help her. Adahy opens my buckskin wide, hands me the child, and also, help yourself. I stiffen, but the baby folds herself to my unyielding body. She smells my sweet milk and begins to make the small snuffle sounds, so like music. Her lips purse as she nuzzles. Then she draws back and holds me again with her eyes. Milk glazes my swollen nipples. As the baby fastens on, I pull the fullness of my breast away from her face, and she takes her first firm suck. Snuffle, snuffle, slurp. The beautiful sound fills my teepee, drumming in my ears and even in my heart. So that's the end of it.